If you've ever been to therapy, you may have wondered about the process and what really goes on. You may have had therapists that lasted for short periods, or the relationship naturally ended. And I wanted to talk about some of the experiences that I've had in therapy. I was brought to therapy because I had depression and anxiety, mainly because of losing my hair from alopecia and dealing with wearing wigs and headscarves and being told there was no cure, and the trauma, the big T and little t trauma of dealing with alopecia. So that's my story of why I was led to therapy, the main reason. And I have been to a lot of therapists. I've done years and years of therapy. I went to my first, I've also not gone to therapy when I was young because I didn't think, it was in my grandmother was a therapist, my mother is a therapist, and I think I rejected it. I went to minimal management therapy once every couple years. But I do believe in therapy, and I also believe in taking breaks from therapy. So I want to share, I've also was in school to be a therapist for 3 semesters, but I quit. Someday maybe I'll finish that, but I am more interested in other things in my life right now, so I'm not sure if I'll pick that up. But I wanted to give my experiences, since I consider myself to be interested in the healing arts because I do tarot with people, what I think. And here's a list of my thoughts. Perhaps my CBT thought list. If you've ever been to therapy, they may recommend, in cognitive behavioral therapy, they recommend that you do a list of your anxious thoughts. Here's my CBT thought list about therapy. Okay, so 1, ebbs and flows. There's reasons the relationship sometimes naturally ends. Sometimes maybe there's a conflict of interest, if you're sharing with maybe a relative, and it's gotten it was maybe family therapy, and then it turned into turned into individual therapy for that person. It became too difficult to make it work. Or maybe here's another situation: you just moved and they don't you had to get new insurance or something, and they don't take your insurance. Or maybe they only do video and you moved far away and it doesn't make sense. Or maybe it's just it doesn't make sense for your schedule. Maybe you were unemployed and you got a job. There's a million reasons that it could just naturally end, where you're just I can't work with this person anymore. And I've had relationships, for example, when I lived in Boston, my first long-term therapist, it was for a year. I put the commitment in to go every week for a year, and that was the first time I had done that. I was 23. She was fantastic. We didn't have any negative endings, and she, I really appreciated her help, and she couldn't maintain, she wasn't really into the phone therapy, and I had moved to New York City, so it just wasn't feasible, and I started seeing someone else. That's another thing. Another person might just take their place that's more convenient, that has things that you need to learn. Okay, vibrational energy match is number 2. I highly believe in Abraham Hicks, which is a school of thought about energy matches and vibrational output, and what comes to us is also about what we're putting out. Which there's a lot of ways to read that, so I don't want you to read that negatively if bad things are happening to you. Sorry. But so in some way you are a vibrational match energy wise to the person that you have selected to be your therapist for whatever period of time. There's something about them and your healing process. You're at the same stage at some point, because I also believe in IFS therapy, which talks about many different selves, many different parts of us, and some part of them is needing healing through you. That's how I see it, and ditto with the other way, because I see that most healers work, once they've started healing themselves, they really need to heal others, and that's kind of their imperative. So that involves also healing aspects of the self through others. Okay, so you're an energy match is something to remember. Thing is, you might change and they might change, and you might no longer be an energy match, which could also lead to a natural disruption and just an end in whatever. working together. Number 3, microcosm of the environment and or inner issues. So whatever like the dynamic is, and this is gonna lead to something great, but you're not gonna expect it. Whatever the dynamic is with you and the therapist, I'm sure there's good parts and there's bad parts. There is something very specific being mirrored to you through this dynamic that you either, probably aspects you haven't gotten from people and probably aspects that you have gotten from people. And the really good therapeutic relationships set proper boundaries where we're not focusing so much on what we don't get. We're focusing more on what's being given. But I'm gonna say there's a caveat to that, where sometimes a negative match can be transformative. Okay. So it's not only, so also like, it's just like whatever the situation is with your therapist, it somehow matches your situation. Maybe, for example, that therapist in Boston she and her husband, she was older, but she and her husband lived alone and they didn't have any kids. And me and my boyfriend at the time lived alone down the street from her and didn't have any kids. So in that aspect, we had that similarity of that just dynamic. So simple things like that you could have in common with your therapist that you don't realize. Okay, so then positive dynamics. So yeah, you can get like, maybe you had a really like distant parenting situation, you're getting healing, like you're getting that parenting sort of aspect from them subconsciously. Or maybe you had like a relationship with a significant other that was incredibly damaging and you're learning that trust with them through the relationship. And that's really what the therapeutic relationship is to learn a fake relationship so you can go make real relationships. Like to learn, I mean, this person's paid to talk to you. Okay, so now I want to, and so that can be really healing. If someone like, you know, say you've been down in the dumps and someone like brings humor, or say you like have no self-esteem and someone like affirms like something really good about you and gives you self-esteem, or say that you're like over worrying and someone gives you some new tool like CBT for me. Also, you can, so here's how the negative dynamics come in and be transformative. You have things that are boundaries for you that are good and bad, and so does the therapist. And that's going to become clear as I talk. So I once had a therapist who I completely just forgot our session. And then I was trying to be like, all like, thinking about my subconscious. And I was like, you know, maybe I'm like really just afraid of some of the stuff we're talking about. And like, it's really not personal, but I truly did forget our session, but I'm wondering why. Because I'm not forgetful. So, I was trying to be like transparent, and she said, okay, well, I don't work with people who miss sessions, and we're done. And I learned from that, okay, some people have different boundaries than, I learned from that the therapist must have had some sort of boundary violation that happened to her, not only with clients, but with people, that made her very strict with her boundaries. And then I took that a little bit, not personally, and I thought about what she said, actually, and it affected me for years. Okay. Another negative dynamic is, say somebody, okay, I guess I may give a bunch of my own personal experiences. Someone may like hit you right where it hurts right away. And it may be too much for that therapist. They may not be able to handle the level of intensity or whatever that you bring because they're not trained. And they may just intuitively ask a question that like brings the floodgates or brings the intensity. And that may happen right away, super quick, and they're not ready, and they may just kind of like cancel you. Here's some ways that therapists will get rid of you without, if they want to like end the relationship, but they don't know how, and they don't want to like get in trouble, you know. I think it's much more ethical to say, we're not a match, here's some recommendations, I think you're great, but it's like, or just say like, you could even just say like, we're not a match because of my scheduling, and be super clear about it. But I've had a lot of therapists. I've had therapists like just push me out, like change their scheduling, make it like I'll be like, I don't like this time ever, and they'll be like, that's the only time I have, and it's like game playing. Or I've had therapists like just like not schedule me or just flake on me, like completely flake and not do the session, and then if I'm like upset, be like, oh, you're like difficult. I've had tons of experiences. The thing here is transference. Okay, I'm actually jumping ahead in my list. So Freud talks about transference. So it happens on both sides. It's not only erotic transference, which means that like we may have a crush on our therapist or they may have a crush on us. It's also like we bring up stuff for them and they bring up stuff for us, okay? You may say something that is triggering for them with no intention of doing that at all, because you come from different backgrounds, you have different beliefs, whatever, anything like that. Some therapists are not as good at not taking things personally. Of course, if you're saying something like inappropriate or like racist or homophobic or like totally out of line, some therapists might just be like, I can't work with you, and good for them. But like, I mean, no, some therapists might still work with that and be like, let's look at why you're feeling that way. Anyway, so, or sexist, that would really bother me if I was a therapist. It would be hard to encounter someone with that. Okay, also, another thing, some therapists have like triggers, like things that, the thing is, a lot of therapists are brought to therapy because of their own issues, and then they realize it's a great career, and then they go become therapists, okay? That's a huge pathway for a lot of therapists to become therapists, is they realize something about them, they've had trauma, and they want to help other people, and that is a true, genuine thing. Problem is, some of them will have these blind spots that they just don't want to work with people who have addiction because maybe their sister died of addiction. They don't want to work with people who are alcoholics because they were married to an alcoholic for 20 years. It's totally fair. And that may be something you find out as you go. There may be like opinions and beliefs that are like controversial that like people don't agree. Okay. Here's some other really detrimental negative dynamics that actually, and I'm going to say something controversial here, that these, so for me, I've had passive therapists, I've had insulting therapists, I've had therapists where, let's see, I extended warmth and was never met with it, like in just like multiple ways, but stayed with the person. Also, just like I've had therapists who just played scheduling games or tried to push me out, but dismissive is the word I was looking for. It was so triggering that I couldn't think of the word. Dismissive is like the worst. So these are all, the thing is, those are all my issues. So working with those people transformed me to be like looking at the other, who in my life is passive and silent and not giving me feedback. Plenty of people, or maybe the greater universe as a whole. I had to look at that. Who in my life is insulting me and I'm just like taking it, okay? Who in my life is like, and also those insults to like, okay, if you've ever seen the movie Showgirl, The Last Showgirl with Pamela Anderson Lee, great movie, I freaking love it. She's like basically this like sexist guy that she's like performing for to see if she can get the part. He like said she's old and unattractive or whatever, and she's like, I'm beautiful, and I'm like, that's right. And you know, she's in her 50s, and it's like, why can't women in their 50s be beautiful? That's like ridiculous. There's plenty of hot women. Look at J-Lo. Anyway, so I'm saying sometimes when people say things really controversial to us, it brings up such an energy in us that we're like, no, F you, actually, you know. And that could be a lot of things. It could be anything, and it could also just be, it could be intentional or not intentional. The therapist could be trying to neg you or trigger you to leave, or they could actually just be putting their foot in their mouth, or they could actually just be really closed-minded. There's all sorts of, these are the sort of pitfalls of opening up to someone psychologically, which I believe is necessary for healing. Okay, so I was going to talk about REBT therapy, but really what I'm talking about more is like reactive therapy, which I don't even know if is like an actual term, where like I once had a therapist who, I'm gonna write the real term for this below because I know this is a more like clinical term. I once had a therapist who, at a certain point, this is a male, I had known him for years and had been in and out of working with him. He was like, I cannot work with you until you make this specific change. Like I won't work with you. And I was like pissed, but like I had to go make that change. He really pushed me and I did make that change. So I'm saying sometimes if someone's a jerk in therapy, it's not only, it's like sometimes it is intentional, because maybe a lot of therapists are overwhelmed and they're like overloaded and they like may not like you for some reason. They're projecting their own stuff for some reason. So that's intentional. So you may, but you're still lining up with that person to deal with those issues. Who in your life is like that? Where are you being treated like that? So I think it's still positive. And then, okay, the next thing to remember is the therapist is also transforming. They're in their healing journey too. And you are bringing up things relationally for them too, okay? Just to say it plain and simple. Maybe you're like really wordy and verbose and it's like overwhelming for them. Or like maybe you like send emojis or like pictures of things during the week and they like don't like any contact during the week and they also don't know how to tell you that. Or maybe like the ground rules are never clear and there's like sort of like a lot of intimacy and then not intimacy. I've had that with a therapist before, like especially with a female therapist before, where it's like, what are the boundaries? I've had therapists come to my grandmother's funeral and then set other strange boundaries where I'm like, what are the boundaries? It can get very unclear because you're telling this person your soul. And then it's like they have to also be like, what's my boundary? So there's a really good movie called If I Had Legs I'd Kick You, I think, that just got all these awards with Rose Byrne. And it's a really great movie because it's basically about what I'm talking about, that she has all these horrid like issues in her life. She is a therapist and she's overloaded. She like is like, her house is damaged. She's like living in a hotel with her like sick daughter. She can't take care of her on her own. And the husband is like off away on some trip, and she finds that trigger point therapist. She finds Conan O'Brien, who's like dismissive and rude, and she breaks all the boundaries. And then he's a rude a-hole, and then it pushes her to be like to get to break through something. She breaks through something, okay? She does do some bad things, but in the end, if I remember, I'm pretty sure it all works out. But I'm trying to say that like sometimes these interactions, if it's not pleasant, there's still something good that happens. Okay, and my personal beliefs for therapy is, number one, I believe in Roger's theory of positive regard, which is that we have to put our own prejudices or our own biases aside, our own whatever aside, and just sort of be the witness for someone's issues and just positively regard them, basically to like them and be nice to them, which may differ from a lot of people. So those are my beliefs about therapy. Some of my favorite things I've done in therapy are EMDR, but I don't recommend it doing it long term because it will give you a headache and it's very intense. I have done neurofeedback, which I recommend doing for not more than 2 years, because after that point you've learned what it does. I've done one of the most transformational yoga. Yoga has been a huge therapeutic tool for me, so I just came out of nowhere. But I went to a psychodrama once that was like probably the most transformational therapeutic experience I've ever had, where there were only a couple people, you like act things out basically, and I did acting as a kid, so I think it really did something, where you they sort of give a prompt and then everyone like okay, you're standing here and where you want to be in your life is over there. Describe where you are now talk about what's over there, and then what are the steps you need to take, and then we're going to take them together. It was so transformative. And I even like took my wig off, which I felt really like I always wore my wig in my 20s. I like barely wore headscarves because I was so sick of the stigma of people asking me about my headscarf. Now I just really don't care. But I still wear my wig sometimes, but it's not the same. It's not the same where I was like having to wear it all the time because of the anxiety I had. Anyway, so that was a really transformative experience. I would say a big healing moment. And then I think there's little healing moments that happen over long-term therapeutic care that can really help. And yeah, ultimately I think sometimes the therapist changes and the client changes, and sometimes the therapy itself, whether positive or negative, pushes both people in different directions. And those are my thoughts on therapy, and I hope you have a great day.